Yesterday, we had a lot of sessions. I certainly hope if you haven't made it yet to make it to the connection of the networking and seeing all these technologies that we spoke of and a lot of the things that many people think. And I found last evening talking to people that a lot of people think the things that we're talking about is really the future. And when you go to the Connect Zone and you realize that we have them. We have them now and ready for you to implement. The most important voice we have is yours. This conference is very different than others, and I would hope you're seeing that. That, as I mentioned yesterday, 90% of the sessions are customers talking to customers and talking about the situations that you have. And it's actually this morning, we want to continue that on this panel where we have a set of diverse customers that are going to speak about their digital transformation. To do that, we've asked to have this session moderated by Corey Johnson, who will moderate this panel. Corey is the chief marketing strategist of Ripple. Prior to Ripple, Corey worked as a hedge fund portfolio manager at Kingsford Capital Management, and he was a journalist at Bloomberg, and maybe you might have known him at CNBC, covering high growth technology companies. So an awful lot of experience in digital transformation. Earlier in his career, Corey ushered in many startups. Many of the startups including Street.com, the Industry Standard, Slam, and Vibe magazines. So please invite me in joining Corey up on the stage. I'd like to ask the team members to come up on the stage as I introduce them. We have Sai Estefani, Chief Information Officer of MGM. We have Matthew Ketchke, Senior Vice President, Customer Energy Solutions. Les Riddell, Chief Executive Officer, Meed, and David Wilson, Chief Innovation Officer at Bechtel. Thank you, Mike.
Awesome. Great stuff. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning, and thank you guys for being up to the panel. Just a little background. So when I left money management and thought I was on the beach and was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life, I didn't think it was going to be much, and I came up with an idea for a TV show that I brought to Bloomberg, and it was really about this topic of digital transformation. It was this notion that the first wave of technological change happened in Silicon Valley to technology companies, and great big technology companies came to be. But then you had this real dramatic transformation happening in what we sort of eventually came to define as mobile, cloud, and that those kinds of changes were really changing all businesses, not just technology businesses and not just startups. So I'm excited to continue to have that conversation now that I'm far from being a journalist again. So what I thought I'd do is have each of you just kind of talk about just a little bit about your business and maybe the single biggest pressing concern at your company when it comes to digital transformation. We start all the way down there. David, please.
Yes, so David Wilson, Chief Innovation Officer at Bechtel. Bechtel, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, we're a large 120-year-old privately held construction, engineering, and procurement company. And
the largest private company in the world?
So not
Bechtel, Uber?
So probably not Bechtel, not quite to that. But
yeah.
Very large, very rich history, complex mega projects. If you have been on a road or been in an airport or used power, you've probably experienced some of the projects that we've built across the globe, everything from the Hoover Dam to the solar fields at Ivanpah. So the reason I share that is as we try to disrupt, in my role, disrupt with intent, and we saw yesterday the McKinsey curves that have been around for a couple years now, showing the gap in E&C sectors. So there's a lot of opportunities. So my role is really to disrupt that and to drive the transformation organizationally. The single biggest challenge to your question that we have and that we're trying to drive is how do we come up with solutions that are more appealing than this little guy right here? Paper still has mass appeal in the field. It's configurable, it's interoperable, I can customize it. It's mobile. It's super mobile. If I lose connectivity, not a problem. I mean, I can go online or offline, right? So it's got a lot of appeal, and historically in the E&C, we focused a lot on design digitization and not for the builder. And one of the things we're trying to drive is how do we create a better experience for our builders so there's something more appealing than paper to drive the digital adoption, which then snowballs into AI and machine learning. So that's my challenge, is making something better than paper for our builders.
All right, well, let's just keep moving right down the panel. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Les Riddell. I'm CEO of Meed. We're a Santa Monica-based fintech company that is looking to help a select number of banks lead to disruption in the industry. And in contrast to the paper, the phenomenon that's changing the banking industry is this device here. Average consumer spends 5 hours a day on this. Average teenager spends 9 hours a day on this. Fundamentally, this is altering and changing. It's transformational in terms of what it's doing to consumer behavior, how they communicate, how they acquire information, how they make purchase decisions around everything, including financial services. What we saw was a disconnect between consumers who, because of the access provided by this device, are able to curate their own financial services and looking for alternatives, looking for combinations of fintechs, using the Venmos, the Lendits of the world, in addition to products from multiple banks, because they were not able to get that from a single financial institution, and an entire industry that's facing its Kodak moment, where banks, because of legacy technology, and there's platforms that are still running than were there when I started my banking career, cannot innovate quickly enough to meet this market need. So as a fintech, what we saw our role is, rather than compete with banks, we would bring the market to the banks with an innovative solution, a global social banking program, in partnership with banks, so consumers can get the technology, or consumers can get the technology they're looking for, the services they're looking for, and banks can get the technology that they're looking for with an Oracle Banking as a Service platform where they're not limited in speed to market by the legacy core. They can launch this in 6 months.
Man, first I want to, on behalf of everyone in the room, I want to thank you for the lights and the power you've given us, the heat in this building.
I got a promise to keep them on for the entire meeting.
Good work. Talk to me about Con Ed and where you are in terms of digital transformation.
Great. So Con Ed is the electric, gas, and steam provider for New York City, traditional public utility. Our company is probably very representative of the industry, both in the US and nationally, that we are seeing significant change. So it's been a fairly staid industry. Actually, Con Ed is the oldest publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange today, so very established company. But we're seeing a lot of change. And that change is really driven by three things. First is changes in policy, particularly environmental policy around emissions, carbon emissions specifically. Changes in what the public wants, so what do consumers want from their electric company and utility companies is changing significantly. And the last one is changes in technology. And these guys both had great demonstrations. I can't fit a solar panel in my pocket and pull it out on stage, but that's really the best example. It's new technology that allows customers to access energy in different ways, and also to control their energy usage in different ways. Today, there are home appliances that could be controlled and change how people use electricity. All of those things are really changing the dynamic of how the industry functions. Most utility companies in the US today, at least electric utilities, have seen their peak sales and are now in declining sales. So we're seeing declining sales of what some perceive to be our product, which is electricity, but an increased value in electrical connectivity. I don't think anybody sees connection to reliable electricity as being less valuable in the future, but we're using less and less actual electricity.
I know that at MGM you leave prop humor to Carrot Top, and he's not here today, but you are, thank goodness, Si. Talk to me about MGM and sort of the role of digital transformation there. What's your biggest single focus?
Well, last year 42 million visitors came to Las Vegas, and MGM Resorts kind of control about half the strips. And the crowd is changing, and and the dynamic of our business is changing rapidly. We today, if you ask anybody what MGM Resort does, they think it's gaming and gambling and casinos, and our landscape is changing rapidly. Today, 35% of our revenue comes from gaming, and means 65 to 70%, depending on the location, of revenue comes from non-gaming. So we're becoming a non-gaming, and we're rebranding ourselves as entertainment. So, and the crowd that comes to Las Vegas is getting younger. So they're extremely connected, they have their devices, and we're part of that journey in the travel industry. So they book their flight and their hotels online, they catch an Uber to come to our hotel. So they're using technology all around that travel, and when they enter our facilities and venues, they want to continue that journey with their preferences and so forth. So that's our biggest challenge is as we shifting from gaming to entertainment company, because that's how we were rebranding ourselves as an entertainment company, and all that goes with it with the younger crowd, and how do we engage with them during the trip, pre-trip and post-trip, and how does transformation help get connected with this new as we reinvent ourselves and Vegas reinvent itself with the new visitors.
So I thought it would be useful, appreciate that, talking about failure in as much as you're willing to confess just between us. Because I think we've all had projects or inherited projects, if you want to blame somebody else, or seen projects regarding this issue of digital transformation and seen it not work. But I think, of course, there's usually greater lessons in failure than success. So I wonder if any of you have got examples you'd like to share. Well, one of you go first if you want, but on something, a process that maybe didn't get to where you thought it would, or you didn't actually take the right first step. You mentioned one yesterday. Yeah, go ahead.
There's, coming out of the banking industry, as new technologies come, it's hard to kind of change your thinking, and that's one of the mistakes and failures, if you will, of looking at taking what we do today and putting it on that new technology. And what we see and what we are finding many banks, and the failure is that's still that same mindset is pervasive in the industry, and that's what's really creating the sort of Uber moment in the industry, and it makes it so ripe for disruption, because essentially the mindset with digitization is miniaturization. I shrink the bank and I put it on the smartphone.
The whole bank.
The whole bank.
Everything we do now is
If I
make
could
it
get the
smaller.
entire bank onto that smartphone, I would.
That's why First Republic gives me reading glasses when I go in there. It's just the whole bank shrunk down.
And that's what misses the point. Technology is an incredibly powerful tool, but looking at how it can also be transformational to your current business models, not just a way of automating your current business models.
Yeah, certainly we're seeing that at Ripple. I've joined a company that's selling software to banks, and banks are very resistant to make change for good reasons. They're protecting something pretty important, and they can't have the kind of failure rates that other businesses get. Although they get that with some of the softwares, to them a 4% failure rate moving money across border is acceptable currently, which is kind of what's amazing. That's what the SWIFT system is what we're trying to fix, but I feel your pain. Yeah, you talked to me too about failure rates. I mean, if the electrical grid was out for 4% a day, that'd be one random hour throughout the day. You guys are a lot better than that, and yet you're trying to make a digital transformation.
Yeah, so the example we go back to is about 7-8 years ago, a fancy device came out, a tablet. If everybody recalls, the iPad came out. It was revolutionary. It was going to change construction productivity. All we needed to do was buy a bunch and deploy it to the field. Problem solved. Digitized. We're done. Took forms that were typically on paper and put the exact replica on a tablet. If anybody's used a form on a tablet, you know it's awful. The drop downs and the scrolling, and very quickly you're back to paper and say, well, this is nonsense. And so the example I come back to is we thought it was a technology problem, but really digital allows us to take a process approach and reimagine the whole process. And historically, the process has been governed by the transaction vehicle, which is paper. Now when you go digital, you can totally re-script that and reimagine how you're going to execute with the builder or the user in mind. So how do you create something that they want to use that makes their process very easy and very effective? And so we went with the technology, thought it was a technology problem. It was not. It was actually our remodeling around digital that we could then deploy new solutions. And now the craft, 7 years later, want wearables, want tablets, want smartphones, want data vaults.
They want wearables?
They want wearables.
What do they want?
They want watches, they want...
That will do what, like in a construction process?
So think about it. If you're at the work face and your hand's free and you want a status, hey, I just got that done, click, click, tap, tap, done. I've just statused my work, so I don't have to come and take a clip of what I did today. I've just statused, hey, this work is complete at this work face. Come and check it. You know location, you know work status, you know what got done, and you're not having to filter through pages and pages of scope. And so knowing that we can now work with the smaller form factors, can we get better about instructions? Can we go back to what Lego and IKEA does on a small form factor that makes guiding work much more efficient and effective?
But it's really a process change, really, not just to throw some semiconductors near a worker.
Yeah, the hardware is just an enabler. It's about how do you reshape a work process now that it's unencumbered by a paper vehicle.
Matt, you got a Con Ed failure for me?
Ours is very similar. So we do a lot of large physical construction projects as well. We tried to reimagine our work management systems and put them all, digitize all of them. And really what we did was digitize an existing process. And the problem with that is, A, it'll often force you to make a lot of reconfiguration and customization to the software, which is not particularly helpful, and also fairly expensive. And those don't always work as well once you do that reconfiguration. So I think one of our biggest lessons learned is once you're going to digitize the process, you really need to avoid customization and reimagine your process around how the software can help you work better.
In my role as a money manager once upon a time, I had a short position in a company, in a Las Vegas company that was starting to sell new technology for gaming, including RFID chips inside of chips, so they could help measure comps better by judging how much a player was playing. And I have a friend who's a professional gambler and said, the problem with, I can tell you how to hack the chip. I'm like, it's barely on the market. So I showed up at the big gaming conference. There's a technology problem on the casino floor. So that would measure how many chips were in front of you. So I snuck one of the chips under my hand and I put it on my knee, under the table. And the reader was in the table. So I would lift my knee and I'd say, how much money is in front of me? And the guy would say, well, there's $5,000 in front of me. I'd say, look again. He'd say, oh, it says 6,000. And I'd lower my knee and he'd look away. Well, now it says 5,000. So the notion of technology, it was a good short. The stock collapsed and when the product failed and I made some money. It's what we did. And so those are among the myriad of problems that you guys have got to try to deal with, which is technology solutions that don't actually solve the problem they claim to solve. I wonder if you've had experiences of technologies that didn't work like they were supposed to.
We have many, unfortunately. We launched the mobile app, I think 3 years ago, that I think total download of 20-some thousand downloads. So it didn't go nowhere because it really didn't do anything besides just showing your web stuff content on mobile. So, and we have a series of other launches. We have had kiosks that didn't work and so forth. So I think one thing that unique is about MGM is we allow failure and we admit it, raise our hand, and we just go at it. So we spend, next week or two, we're going to launch our next generation of mobile app that's going to open the doors to your room. So when you come to Vegas, you can check in and just through a digital key go to your room. So because of our massive size, we just spent $10 million just replacing locks. So forget about the app, just so the Bluetooth lock, so we can just open the door. So, and this was, after the failure of the first app. So we just keep at it until the problem gets solved. So we're very excited about the launch of this new app next week or two. We do a soft launch and then big launch. You're going to come to airport, you're going to see signs that says, check in now, and
do you see that as also as a marketing function, that you're going to hit that millennial 9 hours on the phone, or you said teenagers, but that teenager is going to be a millennial or spending money as a 20-something pretty soon?
Absolutely. If you look at our customer surveys, we do a lot of customer surveys that says, how was your stay at MGM? The number one issue was check-in line, because when you walk into the hotels like this, there's no check-in line at any time you walk in. Our hotel average is 4,000 rooms. So in a peak day, you could spend an hour and a half in our line. Even though I could have 30 front desk, there is, when there is 1,000 check-in, and that's how we get them. Like around noon, we get 1,000 people checking in. There could be a line of, so we see this digital transformation of getting to your room will solve one of our primary reason of dissatisfaction with our customers that come to Vegas. And number two was Wi-Fi, and we have spent over $20-some million in replacing 25,000 access points. We almost, have a city running on Wi-Fi, so you can walk in from across all our properties and be connected through Wi-Fi without losing connectivity. So those were the number one and number two, issues that our customers were facing, and we, starting in a couple of weeks, we'll solve both of them.
Bob, I've got to think that the advantage of Oracle, because you get to touch so many customers, is you learn from those customers, because start to share those sort of macro lessons about, hey, don't just throw iPads in the field. Don't just take your existing website and put it on a mobile app. You're able to sort of help think about how your customers can have success with a new product rollout.
Yeah, so the big thing at Oracle is that we're kind of like two companies, we're two layers. We have to run our own company, we have to do all of our own digital transformation. But then it's layered because we have to view what we build through your eyes. What are your problems? Because we are a B2B business, you are in many cases a B2C business. So we're trying to build products that are going to be from the consumer coming back to our customers, and then while we do that, while we run our own company. So we have kind of a layered view. The biggest thing that we see, and I'd love to actually ask the question on it, is the enlightened that are here, that want to hear about digital transformation, you that are in the midst of digital transformation, are the barriers within companies that don't want to adopt the digital transformation. And when we find out that we're talking to, as I call the enlightened, that want digital transformation, the biggest hurdle is your ability to convince your organization that this is a right thing. That, to me, is one of the biggest hurdles. So we always advocate for senior management involvement, right from the top, that this is going to be a dictate, that we're going to move. Because without that, things just seem to die. So I'd like to ask the question to them, like, how do you overcome that?
Let me take it first. So at Ripple, we're dealing with this technology of blockchain, where we've identified blockchain as a way to solve some real big issues in banking, and in particularly moving more money cross-border. And what we find is that among the things that we can take care of is this need for the trillions of dollars, about McKinsey says 27 trillion, in Nostra Vostra accounts that sit around with treasuries, whether it's corporate treasuries or banks, have that money sort of laying around for potential use across borders, where US banks are sitting on billions in pesos and rand and euros and yen and Thai baht and krona and Swiss francs and whatever, just waiting for potential transactions. Using our blockchain technology, they can just transfer that into blockchain in a second or a few seconds, and on the other end transfer in whatever currency they want. Well, the existing treasury departments that have been built at these companies, the hundreds of employees that Amazon has even managing APIs to deal with all the banks they've got, it's hard for them to think about the idea they wouldn't need that at all, that maybe all those people would lose their jobs or find more productive work because of better technology has emerged. But the CEOs of the banks, they see it. And the CIOs, they see it. They recognize this kind of big transformation that can happen. So we're finding we've really got to sell at a very high level. We've got over 100 banks that have signed up to use our services within the last year or so. And it's starting to cascade, but it has really taken top-level sales to make that happen.
Right. Well, to your point, one of the bigger obstacles of moving to the cloud is not the CEO, it's not the line of business, it's the CIO, the IT infrastructure, because of that exact purpose. Like, gee, if we move everything to the cloud, what are my 5,000 people going to do? They're going to lose their jobs. I might lose my job, you know. And I think the CIOs have this issue of, do I get on board with the cloud to be aligned with my executive management team that wants, you know, faster, better, more reliable, more secure, cost-effective solution? Or I have to fight what happens when I move this into all the people? And that's a big barrier.
There's a saying that revolutions are never started by the existing monarchy, which I think works in boardrooms and works in executive rooms as well. But no one adopts new technology just for the sake of new technology. The motivator at the end of the day is, and I look at the banking industry as an example, where structurally it's becoming uneconomic. You have a huge infrastructure with traditional delivery channels, branches, which are essentially at this point kind of museums for old furniture. You rarely see anyone there, and you know, that's a cost structure that banks at this point are trying to transition out of. That's a real motivator, because ultimately it is, I think, at the top of the house where they need to see the pain and the need for changing and evolving technology. And Bob and I were actually having this conversation yesterday because we both remembered Hogan systems. When, you know, back in the early 1970s when I started my banking career, that was a state-of-the-art system. And I think if we had a show of hands here of banks, I would bet that more than half of them are still running that same technology system. So, you know, API and that do not fit together. So how do you innovate? How do you, and that's what I think is driving a lot of the thinking around new technology and the investment in new technology. It's a matter of survival.
Well, I told you yesterday we had a customer tell me last week that they'd done a study and found that their millennial customers at their bank were 3 times more likely to want to go to the dentist than to go to the bank branch. And maybe that says more about dentists than anything else getting better. What you were going to say?
Yeah, the Gardner actually did a study that came out just a month or so ago that says number one reason that transformation fail and don't take in the organization is the culture. The culture is like enterprise antibody for new idea. So it just stops new ideas from coming. And it's because of the turf territories, what happens to my job, losing control and so forth. So I think to Bob's point, the culture was in the survey was 3 times bigger than the rest of the reasons. So if you just focus on the culture, how do you bring in innovation as a culture of the organization that you're not going to survive in this organization if you don't adopt innovation at the core principle of the companies. And that really needs to be driven from top, because that's how culturally change from top. Executives set the example, demanding it, and then trickle down the organization. So culture is the number one issues every organization has to address when they make this transformational journey. And at MGM, this starts at the top. Jim Mearns comes, he goes to Stanford and does Silicon Valley tours with us, and he's really entrenched with this transformation and wants the transformation to take place. So it happens from the top and it comes through the organization.
Matt, what about Con Ed? What's the biggest obstacle there to making these transformations?
I think for Con Ed and probably most regulated utilities, whether it's water, gas, electric, is that we have this 2-layer process for decisions on significant innovation, which we have to often go back to a regulator to get approval. So you have to first get it sold to the C-suite and that we really want to go forward with this transformation. I guess one great example through most of the industry had been automated meter readings. This is the ability to communicate directly with the electric or gas meter device, smart meters. And it's a great technology. Traditional electric meters gave you one reading once a month, so you had 12 pieces of data about how customers were using electricity every year. Smart meters can pull that back every 5 minutes or so. So you have thousands of times more information about how customers are using energy, and the ability to have all kinds of different products and services now around that different usage pattern. But you have to first sell it internally on how this would benefit customers, how it would benefit the organization. Then you have to go to a state change the workforce. Then you have to go to a state regulator and convince them to allow
that
you
it's not a United Nations plot to monitor what people
to monitor people or to reduce.
It's not a United Nations plot to monitor.
You talked about it before. You weren't going to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Alex Jones is not here.
But that, for most of the kind of regulated utility business, being able to explain how this transformation is going to work to a regulator and then get authorization to spend that money as part of your capital plan, really it can be a challenge.
Interesting. You were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think just got exposed to this last week, actually, the numbers, but I think the harsh reality is in any of these changes, about 10 to 15% are going to actively work against it. You can call them terrorists, call them whatever you want. They're going to undermine what you're trying to drive. And then probably the even scarier part, because you can typically tell who those folks are, 60% are going to fake it. They've picked up enough of the language that they're able to talk to digital transformation and articulate it, but they're faking it and they're not really on board. They're kind of hedging to see how this goes and does it survive or does it die? And there's the 20 to 30% that are excited. And I think it's, how do you find the 20 to 30% and continue to promote them and encourage them? And there may be some turnover. I think the people part of it, how do you train? How do we prepare? I think there's a massive part about, people are operating from my job appears to be threatened, and it very well may be, but how do we retrain and repurpose and redevelop the population? So your job, the task is going away, but that doesn't mean you are necessarily going away. So we want to eliminate tasks to be more productive and more effective in the digital environment. But that doesn't mean that we aren't going to have more work. If we do this right, especially in the E&C, what do we see? The $1.6 trillion gap in productivity that can be redeployed to infrastructure projects. If we do it right, there's more work for everybody. So it's that communication around, yes, we're eliminating tasks, not people.
I would think that your ultimate goal is to work yourself out of a job where Bechtel doesn't need a chief innovation officer, that everyone is an innovator.
No, right? That's absolutely right. I think actually the last 5 jobs I've had have been to work myself out of a job. That might be a trend.
I've worked myself out of every job too, just not in a good way. But yeah. My last job was anchoring this radio show on Bloomberg Radio, XM Sirius, station 119. So it's still on at 2 o'clock. I'm just not on it. Carol Masser, my old colleague, she's terrific. And we did an insurance conference one day. We were dreading it, and it was one of the most interesting days we had on the radio. And we talked to a CEO of a big insurance company, and I asked him, what's motivating you, what companies sort of aspire to and look at. And I was shocked, and he said, I want the customer experience for our customer to be that of Uber. I want them to have the same experience they have with Uber when they're dealing with their insurance company. And I was really shocked by that. So I wonder for you guys, when you look at what sort of customer interface or what digital experience that you see for that you would sort of like your customers to actually get, or your colleagues to actually get when they're using technology. Let me start with you when you're thinking about who's got it right, big or small. Another one I'll throw out there is for me is the insurance provider that we had, WageWorks. It's not a great big company, but they'd written a desktop design that looked like the thing you'd use on a phone, and their phone design was terrific. It was 2 or 3 buttons per page, very limited text. I don't know what had to happen on the back end to make that work so simply, but it was very clever and very functional, and I think that they were thinking really, truly mobile first.
Yeah, the company, I don't know about Uber, but the company we compare ourselves to is Disney. We are adult version of the Disney, but nobody's picking on Mickey when they come on our site. So, and we look at Disney as an innovative company, and the way we look at it is we want to know our customer preferences and make those offers. Because nowhere in the world you're going to have 42 million visitors walking around aimlessly looking for things to do, and you control half that space. So the opportunity for us is enormous. And as we become more entertainment company, to interact with these customers based on events, location, trigger-based marketing, all those to those customers that do something with us based on where they are, what they can do next, it's enormous for us to do. And that's what we want to focus on. That's what we're focusing on with the launch of apps and the chatbots that we're going to launch right after that, and start building on those that you finish from a restaurant, and now I can offer you to come to a show that's half sold, and I have open tickets because you're at nearby vicinity of that show. Those are huge marketing opportunities for us. So we look for those type of things, not quite like Uber.
Matt, what about you? Who's got it right?
So there's actually not a lot of great comparison within our own industry. So we really need to look outside of the utility industry when we think about customer experience and improving it. Most people, think about the last time
I really
you
hope
called,
you say Disney right now.
Disney. No. Think about the last time you actually called your utility company. Most people call us when they set up service, maybe if they have a high bill, and then when they disconnect service. And those are all things that you shouldn't need to get on a telephone and wait in a queue to talk to a customer service representative about. You should be able to establish service the way customers have set expectations online via your device. You also should be able to split your bill. And so if you think about the average young person moving into New York City, because of rents and the turnover of folks and the urbanization, we have a lot of young people moving into New York City, and they often are in a roommate situation, and they want to be able to split their bill. None of those things exist today in the current billing platforms that we run. It is very difficult for some to do what you have with lots of other payment services, where you can easily split a bill. The billing systems were all set up essentially for the person who would move in, establish a residence, be there for 20 years, move out 20 years later, not for a much more dynamic population moving in and out of rental apartments. So we're trying to reimagine how we do all of those interfaces that we call digital customer experience to really enable better use of technology and meet the customer where they are.
Interesting. What about you guys? Any ones that jump out at you?
I think from the consumer standpoint, I mean, this is an extraordinarily exciting time. The pace of innovation, the level of innovation, if you think of what artificial intelligence can do in filtering the information and giving you content that's useful at the right time, that adds value, improves your choices, improves your quality of life. There's a statistic I saw not too long ago. It said 98% of the information you receive today is totally irrelevant. and not helpful in any way to the capabilities of artificial intelligence to make those interactions more meaningful from your financial services providers, and really help you in terms of your quality of life. I think that has really tremendous potential. And I'll go back to now the other side of the coin, which is something we mentioned earlier, which is regulators. Again, there's pace of innovation, and there are things that limit the pace of innovation. One, I think, of the changes that needs to occur, particularly in the financial services industry, is the speed at which regulators can adapt and update regulations to accommodate new technologies. And that includes blockchain technology, that includes the ability to do remote ID verification. One country where we're operating, you can do the enrollment and everything right on the smartphone. Incredibly convenient for millennials. And then, oh, by the way, now you have to go to a branch and do a wet signature on an application. And the only reason for that is the regulatory environment hasn't really caught up with what you're able to do with the technology.
Right.
I think that speed needs to be there as well.
And I'm always saying one person's regulation is another person's protection, and those existed for a reason. So I was surprised when I joined Ripple not that long ago that we are spending so much time meeting with regulators all over the world to help them understand blockchain and understand that it's not necessarily just a tool for money launderers, and that we can actually help them to have technological solutions to move money faster, and that's going to empower everyone in the economy. But it's a conversation we have to be very active in. You were nodding your head too, and I was talking about great examples of technology.
So I think where I'd like to get to is where you can co-create with a customer because you've digitized. You now have scope, time, cost all wrapped into an object, and a customer comes and wants to talk about a process plant or an airport or a rail project. Let's step into the environment and actually talk through what does that design look like, talk about total life cycle cost early on in the process where we're effectively co-creating the project through the technology. So it's more of a trusted advisor, a collaborative approach as opposed to the contractual or transactional approach that may exist today. And I think the technology allows that to happen because we can create the supply chain libraries that allow those very dynamic discussions to take place early on in a project to optimize it for the owner-operator.
So is there someone who's doing it really well that you look at as a model in your industry or out, presumably out?
So in the building space, they're getting closer because...
Or weirder.
Or what's that?
Be weirder if you want. You've got something else you're looking at outside of your space.
Yes, if you want to watch a lot of Fixer Upper, so I don't know if anybody else watches Fixer Upper, and it's now off the air. So yeah, I watch a little bit of Fixer Upper with the wife, so we enjoy it. But that concept of sitting down and actually designing a space and pulling it all together to show exactly what it's going to look like. Why can't construction be exactly like that? Granted, different scale, larger footprint, but why do we have to limit ourselves to how it's been done? And I think that's kind of the looking outside the industry. Those types of things inspire me. And I think to Sai's point earlier, our problem on a job site is actually not that different from his problem to get guests into the hotel, registered, and Wi-Fi. Same issues. Can't get people to the job site. Don't have connectivity. So it's really interesting to have the discussion around common problems.
I also wonder, Bob, you might have the best sense of this up here, is when you look across the landscape of all technology, what's coming down the pike that we're going to be sitting here talking about in 5 years? Is it quantum computing? Is it AI? Is it blockchain? Is it what do you sort of see that we're all going to be wrestling with to try to enable sort of the next leg of digital transformation for years out?
It's funny you mentioned that, and you talk about the historic waves of technology, whether it goes back client server, then the internet, then mobile and whatnot. What we're seeing now is convergence of all this at the same time. So when we have conversations and we look across the board, we talk about digital transformation at the bank. So what do we look at? We know the tail is wagging the dog, and we were talking about this yesterday. We know the tail's wagging the dog when there's an area in Boston that has just exploded called the Seaport District. And it's residential, commercial, and in that area there are all brand new restaurants. You see all the new technologies. But I was looking at the banks, and 6 banks went in. They were all empty when you go by them. But they all have
retail spaces for banks.
Yeah, bank branches.
Branches. Yeah.
Bank branches. But they have coffee shops inside the bank. Like Pete's Coffee is in the branch.
Yeah.
And I said, that's interesting that the bank is trying to get people into the millennials. You talk to the millennials, or the ones that you mentioned earlier that spend time on phones. They haven't been into a branch maybe ever. or in 2 years, because they do everything through that technology. So if you look at those technologies, what's being employed? It's being employed mobile. It's changing all the back office applications. The back office applications are all using artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, and then you're going to get into blockchain. So this whole network of all these technologies that you mentioned are all coming together. And then we have the area that Oracle's really focused on right now is autonomous. For the back office, like how do we remove all the manual labor associated with trying to run, implement, patch, and secure all of these technologies? So when I look at it, we used to say, I remember in the 90s when we said, okay, we're going to the internet. Everybody's working on the internet, grow the internet type of applications. Now it's everything across multiple industries. Then how do you take all these applications or technologies and tools, build solutions that the customers can use to actually implement products that are going to benefit them and improve productivity? So it is really the broadest experience I've ever seen of technologies that we're trying to adopt and put into our tools. I think the other thing is that that we try to do is that we don't look at it saying, hey, we're going to sell a blockchain product. We're not going to sell a mobile product. We're not going to sell an artificial intelligence product. What we're doing is we're taking those technologies and building it into the fabric of the product, so that I think in 2 or 3 years, people aren't going to be talking about AI, machine learning, mobile. It's just going to be the product.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm struck by, as I'm learning more about sort of payments infrastructures and banking software infrastructure, that you've got these sort of amazing front end. Like I think Venmo is a terrific customer experience. It's changing the way its customers are moving money, but it might look like a 2018 Porsche 911 on the outside, but behind the scenes, it's a 50s Studebaker still.
Yeah.
And it's intriguing that PayPal's figured out a way to do that, but they still haven't solved the back end problem of really moving money fast. It's an interesting one. But I wonder for you guys, when you're looking at new technologies, what technologies are you starting to just think about or get your head around that you want to be ready for in the future?
There's one, I think if you're running a significant business today, whether in the financial services, whether it's banking, insurance, you want to get out of ultimately the technology business and turn that over to the experts. It's the whole movement of technology to the cloud, where you don't have to be like one of the major money center banks spending hundreds of millions, or in one case over $1 billion on digital transformation. You can have access to that technology in the cloud environment and do what really is your strong suit and your skill set, which is focus on that customer experience. And you always know that that state-of-the-art technology is there, and that state-of-the-art is a moving target, so it continues to be updated, continues to be, the capabilities continue to evolve. So when AI comes into play in a major way, you don't have 10,000 banks sorting out how to do that on their own, especially tier 2 and tier 3 banks. You have that in the as a service platform that you could take advantage of, and you really focus on how do I leverage all these capabilities around customer experience.
Matt, what about you? When you look at the technologies on the horizon, what are you worried about? What do you want to learn more about? What's the one thing that's sort of sitting out there for a big question mark for you?
I think for us, it's also AI, for a similar reason, different technology. So I mentioned smart meters. We're going to deploy 3.3 million smart meters. That's a lot of information coming back. We're also deploying a lot of other sensors across our electric distribution networks. And these networks were designed originally to flow in one direction, from essentially generating station all the way out to customer. As we've talked about more and more customers being able to produce their own electricity, solar being a good example, customers with solar produce electricity for a portion of the day and may export, and then they will consume electricity when the sun sets, and it will essentially reverse that power flow. So you need a lot more sensing technology at the edge of your grid to understand what's going on, and that's more information that is possible to process in the existing ways we do it. So AI, looking at sensor data coming back, I think is a key to how we think about it. That with some grid edge computing to have smart decisions made at the edge, and then the bigger decisions made back centrally.
So I can't imagine the volume of data that you get from everything our customers are doing, everything you're seeing in those cameras that are everywhere, everything that you're seeing at the tables, everything you're seeing with how people are booking and what's happening at the airport before they even get there. And you surely are on top of a lot of that.
Yeah, we have, I was just going to say, that our biggest thing we see impacting our business is getting to that data. We have 40 million.
Getting to it or getting through it?
Getting to a meaningful action out of that data. So what do I do with that data? Because we have so much of it. Every time you buy something, interact with or something, from sensors to cameras to point of sales and so forth. So we have, enormous amount. In my next session, I'll talk about the enormous amount of data we have, and we are spending a lot of money analyzing data and taking action twofold. One, interaction with the customer, how do we interact better with them? And then secondly, for our operational, how do we optimize our operational? Because transformation, if you look at transformation, it could be optimizing, it could be transforming your business. So you can take the scale of transformation in your business to say, how do I want to wholesale my entire and go to something, a model, or I want to optimize what I have gradually. So that's where you take in a transformation. But I want to elevate this conversation to something that's on top of my head, which is, I think all this, what Bob talked about, the AIs, robotics, all that, I think, as I say that to my team, is if you look at all these technology, if you look at, we are in an inflection point that I think, as you boil the water, it takes a while for it to change form. In a digital transformation, we are to now things are changing form, from liquid to gas. And the biggest thing technology going to answer is not the business problem. Right? So think about it. I'm going to say something crazy. You guys probably think it's crazy. But 10 years ago, if I came here and say, technology is going to make us live longer in a more significant way, you guys said he's nuts, right? But today, all the futures talks about that we could live in a more significantly longer period of life. And that technology that's boiling with all that's coming from biogenetic, cyborging and all that, there's a book called Homo Deus, God Humans, that Hariri wrote. It's a very good book. It's the second book to his Sapien, which was the best seller, that says it doesn't take another 4 billion years from amoeba to become Homo sapiens. We will create our next generation of the Homo sapien through technology. So I think technology is going to, for the next few decades, going to be solving the biggest human issue rather than just business issue, how to make more money. We all love money and we're all going to make money and we're gradually going to go through it. But it's going to solve bigger issue, which is, I think, the biggest question the human that have, how do we live longer, even be immortality? So I think that those will answer those questions.
Well, it's fascinating. You look at what's happening with gene editing, you look at what's happening with cancer research, where there's so many products right on the cusp of the market that are
nanotechnology, all that
right.
stuff is, is making a huge.
What are you looking at?
Yeah, so
Top
I saw
that.
Ghost in the Shell in the airplane as I came in. So if anybody's seen Ghost, it's
No, not yet.
It's relevant to the human evolution and genetics. I think the thing that is interesting from a construction, so kind of going back to what I'm curious about is blockchain. Does it help us? Am I buying into the hype? But does it help us get out of a document-based workflow? Can we issue objects as transactions through the design, buy, build phase, and then track all the requirements and all of the detail of those objects through blockchain? Does that unleash this AI potential for construction? Because now you have micro standardization through objects tracked through the blockchain and macro adaptability or flexibility that jobs.
You're saying kind of like Ethereum, a smart contract. That's part of the technology that's attractive.
Well, tracking a pump or a vessel through this life cycle of when it was designed. So does a supply chain issue, does that issuance happen through a blockchain transaction so that we know it's issued, received, approved, bought, built, and installed? And so can I use a ledger to track construction productivity and effectiveness? And if I can do that, then I've got standard objects that allow us to then leverage AI and machine learning to customize the plant in real time. So I'm kind of curious if blockchain can help us crack out of a document workflow, which is used to do change management and get into a better change management process. And I'm not sure if it's there, but that's one of the ones I'm curious
It's interesting,
about.
yeah, almost like a distributed ERP workflow, and yeah. It's fascinating because and I do think, to your point, Bob, like we're at this point where suddenly all this stuff is happening really quickly, and we've got a new generation of workers that is very, very comfortable with piecemeal technological adoption and just trying something out and bringing these things into the workforce before there's the CIO gives the official blessing and lets it spread forth throughout the organization.
I think one of the things we have to guard against as we look at ability to innovate is doing it with purpose. Big data is a great example. And banks and financial services companies are just, they have more data than they know what to do with. And they don't really know what to do with it. So remember meeting with a large Canadian bank, and they had invested in data warehouse and had 27 data scientists. Most of these with PhDs in a room, crunching. And I met with the head of business and said, what does that group do? He goes, they're doing good stuff. I said, how does that, how do you use that information? He goes, I'm not really sure. And that's sort of the stage when as we look at how we innovate, and deploy technology, really focused on that business issue. How does it help us move forward? How do we apply that information? How do we use that to better manage our business, to improve the customer experience? I think that's one of the key changes, because you can do a lot of things today. Figuring out what makes sense to do, and by the same token, what you shouldn't really be doing and spending time on is just as important. Another large bank, innovation. Everybody does things from kind of a herd perspective. Their innovation center, walked into their innovation center and met with the EVP, had tennis shoes on and a hoodie. He said, well, we're the innovation center here. We're thinking of new ways to do business. What I saw was 20 people having a ping pong tournament on the side and another 50 or 60 people that were like doing things at various desks. So they're thinking and they're looking at various ideas, but again, what is that problem? What is that pain point we're solving? How is this going to help us with our business? We always need to keep that in focus.
So let me just quickly through this. I want to ask each of you, if someone in this room walks up to you afterwards and says, I've been charged with doing a digital transformation of my business, what's the one piece of advice you would give? And I'll ask each of you to answer that question when we start with you, Si.
The approach me and my team took is we got a lot closer to the business. So I think the role of the CIOs and head of technologies, whatever it's called in your organization, CTOs and so forth, is really get to know your business and get closer to your business partner. Ultimately, business strategies going to drive transformation, and business strategies today has to be looked at through lens of technology, because change and transformation are going to happen through the technology. So, and the business doesn't have that lens. The job of CIO and head of technology is to give that color and the flavor and the art of possible to your business partner, so you can work together to transform the business. So business partnership and being inside of the business strategy and driving that through technology.
Yeah.
So I would mirror a lot of what Si just said. It's bringing the business line organization together with the technology folks, whether it's for innovation or for digital transformation, for both. I've seen this in different organizations fail when it's all been off on the side, and it's the solution that will be imparted upon you. You need the people with the outside view on what is capable with the technology, but you need to partner them with the business organization to get the buy-in that gets it traction so that you move. So you don't deploy a solution that's not accepted by the organization. So I think partnership between line organizations, the business group, and the technology group together from the very beginning.
Yeah, Leslie, I want to get you to it. It seems to me that we spend so much of our working lives dealing with the how we do it. It's hard to take a step back and say, what are we actually trying to accomplish here? I would imagine, Les, when you're going with your customers, it's kind of the conversation that happens.
Correct. And I think we're saying the same thing a number of different ways here in terms of really rethinking business models, business processes, and it's a brave new world, and our business models are going to change. I mean, Uber's the world's largest transportation company. Airbnb is the largest hospitality company at this point. no one can even remember what a videotape looks like. Think of our industries and look at the opportunities that are likely to disrupt us. Tech companies are sitting on the sidelines, whether it's insurance or financial services, just picking their point. An example of that is Ant Financial in China and Tencent in China, which was the WeChat. They've become significant players in financial services literally overnight. And that is going to occur over and again in other markets, including in North America.
David, what about you? What's the one piece of advice you'd give somebody who's tasked with this onerous?
So building on get the air cover, the support, certainly. I think a big piece is vision cast. Describe what this future state means to the business, so use the business as the lens. Where are we going, and storytell around that so folks have a vision for what it means when we get there, and then set the right metrics in place around innovation, accounting, if you will, that drive effective adaptation, and start tracking how well you're adapting to this journey from today to this vision casted future state to demonstrate progress. And it doesn't have to be an ROI metric. It just has to show that you're progressing in a learning method towards the desired future state that is more disruptive and more digital than we're at today.
Interesting. Bob, let me have the last word on that.
Yeah, I think it's actually not a technology issue. I think it's a cultural issue. Don't do technology just for technology's sake. Make sure you're tied to a solution that is going to benefit the business. And then the most interesting one is make sure you get buy-in and understanding from the senior executives in the business. I cannot tell you how many CEOs I've met where either he or she have said to me in one-on-one conversations, can you explain to me what the cloud really is? And they're running big organizations, and one CEO said to me, my board's telling me I should be going to the cloud, my team is telling me I shouldn't for all these reasons. And he said, but I don't really understand what it really is. And this is a CEO of a top $50 billion company who didn't have clarity on the technology and how he was going to apply it to his business. So I think as the enlightened, as we do these projects, make sure we're just not doing them in isolation, tied to a pure business result, and then make sure you get top-down CEO buy-in and understanding. Because if you do that, then it becomes pretty clear.
Great stuff. Gentlemen, I want to thank you all for this. Is a fascinating conversation, and certainly these are the issues we're all dealing with as business people who aren't going away. So appreciate that. And for that, thank you everyone for being here this morning in the last session.